unmute you. You're just all
And we're recording, everyone. So we're going to head over to live on Facebook and see our group through our event, sorry. I don't know, that's never happened to me before. I would stop recording just for a second.
We're recording.
Excellent, just make a title there.
How do I get back to seeing my presentation?
We'll get there in just a second.
So much excitement.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! All this learning how to do something new.
So I think go back and click on your slides.
Live.
Do we have the presentation up, Jill?
The presentation is up. Yep.
Cool. Woohoo!
Yay!
Maybe we did it.
We did.
Such excitement.
It is. I see we have 2 more minutes till 8 o'clock. We'll wait right till 8. So anyone that's hopping on can hop on.
Okay.
And then we'll
Sorry, I saw a hand being raised for a moment. Maybe that was just a hello.
Hello.
Hello all.
So 1 more minute, we'll get started chatting about intermittent fasting. A topic that is all the rage.
All the rage right now.
Mm-hmm.
So much great information out there.
There is. And so much misinformation out there.
So much misinformation, so much confusing information.
Yeah, it's true. It is true. All right, well, what do you think? Should we get started?
Sure, let's rock and roll.
All right, I just want to welcome everyone to our Wellness Revolution webinar. We are doing these weekly webinars, 30 minutes every Wednesday, most likely, unless someone's schedule doesn't quite work. And these are purely for educational purposes. We'll be bringing on a multitude of expert speakers throughout this next year. And tonight we are very lucky to have Dr. Arthur Lepshaw. He is a doctor of physical therapy. He lives in Ladera Ranch and has his own physical therapy clinic, neurological physical therapy clinic, he and his wife, Kelly. And that clinic, the clinic's in Laguna Niguel though, right?
Technically, yes.
Technically. And they work with people recovering from strokes primarily and other neurological conditions like traumatic brain injury. And Arthur studied at the San Francisco State for his undergrad and received his master's and doctoral degree from Western University in Health Sciences. He has a huge passion for wellness and helping people prevent these neurological injuries. And I can 100% vouch for that. And he and Kelly have 4 kids, so they have a very, very busy life, but they are really, really passionate about teaching people to become the CEOs of their own health and life. So we will hop right into his webinar. I'm going to pass it over to you, Arthur, and you can get started maybe just talking about like what is intermittent fasting.
Awesome, Jill. Thank you so very much. Yeah, what is intermittent fasting? This is like huge buzz going on right now, just like on social media and in healthcare and wellness and the fitness industry. Lots and lots of people are talking about intermittent fasting and what it can do, but there seems to be, to me, a lot of confusion about what people think intermittent fasting is or isn't. So there's really some different types of intermittent fasting. There's something called alternate day fasting, where literally you're eating one day, not eating the next, eating one day, not eating the next. There's something called 5-2, which is becoming very popular right now, where you eat for 5 days and you fast for 2. And during those 2 days of fasting, it may not be 0 caloric intake, but you're talking drastically reduced calorie intake, all the way down to between 500 and 700 calories a day, which I don't know if I can make it out of like my mid-afternoon snack with less than 500 calories. So, that's really interesting. But I think what's becoming the most popular is daily time restricted feedings, where you have a period of the day that you are allowed to eat, and then many hours of the day where you're not eating in a 24-hour period. Even within that, there seems to be a lot of variability. So why do we want to fast? Now, this is a very complicated diagram, and I don't want to get people super, super confused, but I'm actually going to talk about the right side of the screen first, part B. And Prandtl state means when you're eating. And basically, when you eat and you're taking in things like dietary carbohydrates, your body uses insulin to break that down into the glucose that feeds your muscles, your brain, your liver, your heart, so on and so forth. And any excess or fatty acids are then stored for later use. Now, in a fasting state, your body's actually taking those stored fats and then being able to use those as fuel, because you're not taking in those carbohydrates, which can be broken down super quickly. So the fatty acids go to your liver, where they're broken down to make the glucose that then your brain and muscles can use. But if you're in a fasting state, hopefully you're not working out super, super hard, so your muscles don't need as much of it, and most of it's going to your vital organs like your brain and your heart and things like that. So why do we want to fast? We want to fast so we're actually using those fat sources as really, really great energy sources. But we also see some other really amazing health benefits during this fasting state, partly because you're not spiking those insulin levels. And unfortunately, when we spike those insulin levels over and over and over again, your body kind of becomes desensitized to it, and it takes more and more and more insulin to actually do the job. This is what we end up calling a pre-diabetic state, which can in turn lead to type 2 diabetes. So why fast? There are really, really awesome long-term adaptations that the body can have. Increased insulin sensitivity, improved fat metabolism, healthy gut microbiome, because you're not constantly bombarding it. You actually give it time to mature and heal. We can reduce abdominal fat. We can be reducing inflammation throughout the body. We can be reducing blood pressure. And overall, you can be creating greater resilience against disease and against other markers that will attack your body and set you out of balance. So hugely, hugely important. So we're going to touch on a few topics. And again, we'd always have to say before starting any kind of a program, it is super important that you talk with your physician and make sure that, everything is safe for you. That's a little disclaimer there. But obviously, a lot of people talk about dieting because of weight issues and wanting to manage weight. So intermittent fasting can be used to reduce weight, and it's been shown to be effective. But really, to reduce the weight, you also need to reduce the caloric intake. I mean, a lot of people think, and I've even seen some articles, one was just sent recently to me, where the gentleman in the article said that, oh yeah, I just stopped eating for 16 hours a day, but I ate whatever I wanted to between noon and 6 p.m. Well, if you're still piling in the same number of calories a day, even if it's in a shorter period of time, you may not be losing weight. So you may need to actually reduce the calorie intake, and you may need to be very aware of what you're eating during the time that you are feeding versus the time you're fasting. Yes, the studies are showing that 12 hours of fasting is the point at which the body starts using those fatty acids to be used as fuel. And that can increase all the way up to 24 hours where we start to see that peak. But, you know, if you're fasting and not reducing your calorie intake, I don't think you should be really shocked if you're not losing weight, if that's your primary goal. However, there have been shown to be incredible cardiometabolic risk factors in non-obese people that can be improved through intermittent fasting. So we're seeing decreases in blood pressure, decreases in blood sugar, decreases in, the inflammatory markers throughout the body, and even the reversal of insulin resistance in the pre-diabetic and type 2 diabetic patients. So those are all super, super positive outcomes from doing some fasting. Okay. Looking at cardiovascular disease in particular, we can talk about improved blood pressure, improved resting heart rate, improved levels of those cholesterol levels, those HDLs and LDLs, your triglycerides, glucose, and insulin. And overall, as I said, reducing that systemic inflammation and oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is becoming a much bigger buzzword in healthcare in general right now. We know that there's a tremendous link between oxidative stress and disease processes. And historically, we've relied on those antioxidants, right, that we see all over everywhere right now, Jill. I mean, it seems like you can buy, your cereals in the morning with antioxidants in them, and your juices and your drinks, and I don't know, next will be like candy bars with antioxidants. But, that's only part of the picture. We know that taking those direct antioxidants are not enough. And there are other ways you can actually encourage the body to attack that free radical damage at a much higher level. But actually doing intermittent fasting is one way that you can start turning on some of these protective mechanisms that the body has, and you can actually start decreasing that rusting on the inside of the cell. Much like this lady's here saying she walks for 30 minutes and drinks 8 glasses of water and eats 5 fruits and vegetables, but every day she still gets older. Yes, she's still getting older, but if she's fueling her body with the right things, even though her chronological age may increase, she may be keeping that health span going for a much longer period of time, which is truly the most important factor. Cancers and fasting have actually been studied for a really long time. So I was shocked. There are actually studies that were cited that occurred over 100 years ago where scientists described the beneficial effects of fasting and caloric restriction in reducing the number of tumors in the normal aging of the rats and mice that they were studying. More recently, we've actually seen more studies that are showing an increased sensitivity to chemotherapy and radiation treatments when people are in a fasting state. It actually seems that some of these protective mechanisms that your body turns on makes those cancer cells more susceptible to our chemotherapy and radiation, which is really cool and amazing news. And it's leading to some really interesting discussions in the medical field about other ways to be treating cancers or adjuncts that can be used to possibly have greater effect on, killing those cancer cells. Ultimately, if we can keep those mechanisms working in our body to prevent us from ever having cancer in the first place, that's the home run. That's even better. Okay. Neurodegenerative diseases. This is one that's been very near and dear to my heart. And we've seen that studies are showing that with intermittent fasting, you have increased neuronal stress resistance through multiple mechanisms because it can bolster mitochondrial function and apophyge. You can have that increased antioxidant defense that we've talked about, and even have DNA repair. So what's really interesting here, apophyge is your body's ability to kick out those damaged cells, the garbage, the junk in your body. It's the great way to clean things up. So if doing your intermittent fasting can help increase your body's ability to clean out the junk, what a great deal, huh? That's also really awesome. But ideally, this type of intervention needs to be initiated very early. They're starting to do some studies and looking at what happens with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's patients, and people are having early signs of those with intermittent fasting. And due to these neuronal stress resistance being increased through this intermittent fasting, they're actually seeing the slowing down and even the reversal of some of the symptoms in these patients. What I find really, really fascinating as I think about this is, okay, that's great when you already have a disease process started, but what if you started doing intermittent fasting on a periodic but regular basis from a much younger age? Maybe we'll be able to build up these protective mechanisms in our bodies, again, to prevent the onset of some of these horrible things. Speculation on my part, it's purely my swag, but it certainly got my brain thinking when I'm dealing with an 83-year-old father with Alzheimer's, and just thinking to myself, wow, what could have been done years ago to try to help him not have this issue today? And what can I do to make sure that other family members don't get it in the future?
Yeah, and us, right?
Yeah.
Us not getting it. Yeah, I've read a bunch of Dr. Dale Bredesen's research with Alzheimer's and the fasting and intermittent fasting and fasting. And he's really showing phenomenal results with actually even reversing the signs of the disease. You know, you have to be careful about what claims you're making, but he's flat out saying in his book that he's reversing Alzheimer's by using primarily diet, and he's using intermittent fasting very regularly with that. He's also using supplements and some various other things, but he thinks the biggest part of it is the diet. So it's pretty wild.
Now,
so, yeah.
obviously, Jill, you and I aren't making any claims here about, what we can treat, cure, prevent, mitigate, anything. We're just simply sharing information that we've uncovered in our, delving through literature and research. But these are things that I certainly wasn't aware of. And I felt that when I started looking at the literature, there was just so much confusion because most people are simply focused on weight loss. That they're using intermittent fasting as a diet. And it was really interesting to me that some of the articles where authors have talked about what they've loved about intermittent fasting from a weight loss perspective is that they felt very freed from the constraints of not being able to eat carbohydrates or not being able to eat sugars. And that it was very easy to just not eat for a period of a time. So it's really just shifting our thought process about when we eat versus making a change in what and how we eat. As a healthcare provider, I find that to be a little bit of a dangerous way to look at things, because we know unequivocally that there are many, many foods out there today that do not provide the nutritional information for our bodies to work at optimal levels. And so I do believe, as we mentioned earlier, and we'll talk again, that regardless of what you choose to do, intermittent fasting can have great benefits for our bodies, but we truly have to be aware, right, observant of the fuels we're putting in. Right, our bodies are high performance machines. You're not going to take a Formula One car and stick unleaded gas in it. You're not going to take an airplane and try to fill it up with the same fuel we put in our cars. We have to put the right fuel in to get the responses we want. Now, another really interesting topic that sort of deviates from intermittent fasting is the idea of caloric restriction. So caloric restriction has been around in discussions for quite a while as well. And with caloric restriction versus intermittent fasting, we're not just talking about not eating for a period of time each day. We're actually talking about a drastic reduction in the number of calories that we're eating. I mean, we're talking about reducing, 40 to 60% of the calories you would normally take. So if you're on a 2,000 calorie a day diet, for example, you're talking about reducing that to eating only 800 calories a day if you're at the 60% level, or maybe 1,200 calories a day. And I will tell you, I have managed some weight loss in this vein. And it's not fun. It's not fun at all. Just personally speaking, when I was reducing my calories by that amount, and I was not reducing my exercise levels to go with it, because I'm just kind of addicted to my exercise. If there's one thing I'm addicted to, it's probably exercise. I was suffering from hunger. It just doesn't sound like a fun way to go, to either not eat very much or even not eat at all. But you know, we can always say, it's like he says below here, we can ease into intermittent fasting by at least trying to fast between the meals, right? As opposed to grazing all day long or having snacks, which before we know it have turned into multiple hundreds of calories. Now, what has been exciting about the research on caloric restriction is there have been some really, really, really amazing health benefits that have been shown when you set your body into the state of having this much less calories entering into our system. And that's showing to increase what we call NAD, which is a super important molecule in our bodies, and Sirtuins, which is an incredibly important group of proteins. The NAD activity and Sirtuin activity can actually be upregulated by about 96% in 24 hours when you're on caloric restriction. So why do I throw this in there? Why are these important? You know, little biology here for a moment, so please forgive me if I get a little scientific on you, but I'm a science nerd, I totally admit it. So Sirtuins are 7 super important proteins. 3 are found in the nucleus, 3 are found in the mitochondria, and 2 are in the cytoplasm. SRT1, oh, I missed the T there on my abbreviations, excuse me. SRT1 is actually found in both the nucleus and the cytoplasm. So what do these do and why are they so important? Well, what we've discovered is that these Sirtuins play a vital role during cellular replication. When a cell is going to replicate itself, your DNA has to unwind, okay, then it replicates, then it winds up again. And these Sirtuins are absolutely necessary for like conducting this orchestra of how your DNA unwinds and then tightly winds up again. And if there's any copying errors that occur in the DNA, it's the Sirtuins that actually ensure that DNA is put together the right way and repairs any errors that occur in those DNA strands. But lastly, the last thing I want to touch on is at the base of your chromosomes, you can see this annotation of telomeres. And these telomeres are a region of repetitive DNA sequencing, okay? And it protects the bottom of your chromosomes. And as your cells duplicate over and over and over again through time, these telomeres start getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And if they get short enough to a certain critical length, then your cells can no longer divide, and you end up with what they call a senescent cell or a zombie cell, because the cell is just dead. It won't work anymore, okay? So ultimately, when you get enough of those cells that aren't working, your bodies don't function as well. And we see that as what we call aging. So it's vitally important to keep those telomeres healthy, to keep your DNA and your chromosomes duplicating and replicating the right way. And so it's vitally important to have these Sirtuins working at optimal levels. So how do we do that? What do we do? You know, for those Sirtuins in particular, there are many, many things out there that we're learning beyond caloric restriction that can actually help upregulate. There are NAD supplements out there on the market today that can actually increase at very low levels that NAD molecule and in turn the Sirtuin activity in your bodies. But interestingly, there are some activators now that are coming out in the marketplace, NAD activators, that can actually increase Sirtuin activity by as much as 100% in 24 hours. But that's time for another discussion, but super, super exciting to know that we can have that direct effect without having to go through caloric restriction, which isn't a whole lot of fun anyway. I think this guy's been doing too much caloric restriction. He doesn't look very happy.
That's fantastic, Arthur. I heard the telomeres described as like the little shoelace caps, like the ends of a shoelace, the protective caps. So those telomeres have a protective cap on the end, and the Sirtuins are helping to keep that intact and vital and long, right? You want that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great analogy, Because if you think, if those shoelace caps get shorter and shorter and shorter, eventually you have none left, right? And then what happens to your shoelace when you have no cap left on the end?
You have a zombie shoelace.
Yeah, it starts fraying and falling apart, and then, you know, eventually it gets shorter and shorter, and maybe it breaks and it's no good. And literally the same thing can happen with our chromosomes. So that's a beautiful analogy, Jill. Thanks for sharing that. So what to do? Intermittent fasting, caloric restriction, both have really amazing health benefits on many, many levels. But truly, if I were to give my 2 cents here, regardless of what you choose, I think it's super important that we maintain some real basic tenets of healthy eating, right? You know, it's like our poor guy here. I can't help myself. I just like good food, right? So, but what is good food? You know, we've talked for years about the food pyramid, and, you know, the percentage of carbohydrates to proteins to fats that we should all be taking in. And even if you're on a program of intermittent fasting, you are, you know, only eating food between 12 p.m. and 6 p.m. or 12 p.m. and 8 p.m. And then you're fasting for anywhere from, you know, 12, 14, 16 hours a day of not eating. I believe it's still super important what fuel you put into your body. I'm not 100% sure or convinced, because I've seen so much varying information about the best ratios of carbohydrates to proteins to fats. I would say for brain health, most of us don't get enough good fat in our diets. And by good fats, we need to be looking at things like, you know, avocados, your olive oils. A lot of your nuts and seeds have really good fats in them, fish, and even, like, you know, grass-fed butters and some really good, you know, organic grass-fed meats can have some great fats to help us fuel our brains and protect our brains. I would encourage people to be super, super careful of certain carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are not bad, but they should be sourced from plant-based, you know, from your legumes, from your vegetables. I would encourage people to reduce or avoid carbohydrates from things like wheat, carbohydrates from pastas. Those are really simple carbohydrates that we break down. They spike your insulin levels because it's just lots and lots of sugar getting into your bloodstream right away. And even though you're then going to go through a period of fasting and, you know, start burning fats from ketones, you may have spiked your insulin so much that you can still be throwing things way out of balance. And, you know, as much as I loved my fruits historically, I'm learning more and more that I even have to be careful with the volume of fruit that I want to consume, again, because they can have very high sugar contents. And we really need to look at what are the glycemic indexes of different fruits, and there's some that are better than others. So, you know, my suggestion to everyone is, I think intermittent fasting can be so wonderful for so many health benefits. The key literature that I've been reading really recommends that the fasting period should really be anywhere from, you know, 12 to 16 hours of fasting. You know, and 12 is really an absolute minimum, because it can take 8 to 12 hours of fasting to really start increasing your blood level of ketones, meaning your body's really starting to, you know, convert those fats into fuel. So minimum 12, maximum is going to occur more around 16 hours of fasting, but then be careful in the time that you're eating, that you're fueling your body properly, that you're not overly indulging in things that you know are going to be spiking blood sugar levels and creating those, you know, potential issues with your insulin and things like that. And especially if you're using intermittent fasting as part of a weight management or a weight loss program, the number of calories you're ingesting during that period of time still remains important. I'm sorry, I can't just give you carte blanche to eat whatever you want in that shorter period of time. I still believe you do have to watch exactly what's going in.
So I can't eat a tub of ice cream between 12 and 6.
Well, you could, but you might be undoing some of the benefits.
And then how do you feel about coffee with the MCT oil? Because we've talked a lot about the intermittent fasting and keeping that window tight. Is there anything that you can have outside of that window that you're still fasting?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Jill. And I know you've actually had a lot of experience with intermittent fasting, but again, we need to have a clean window, meaning you really need to go your full fasting time without ingesting anything that's going to spike your blood sugars and spike your insulin. So when you're in that period, you can have black coffee, you could have black tea. And the beautiful thing is with something like, Dave Asprey's Bulletproof Coffee, you're adding in healthy fats in the form of medium chain triglycerides, MTC oil, or you're looking at adding ghee or grass-fed butter, which beautifully will add some good fat that can help you feel fuller longer, but not spike your insulin levels at all because there's literally no calories in it.
So there's calories, but they're fat calories. So
Yeah,
your
the
body
fat calories. There's no sugar calories.
Or this is my understanding of it anyway.
Yes.
That your body thinks you're still fasting. So it's like you're mimicking fasting because you're not taking any carbs in, so you're not making any insulin.
And you're not spiking that insulin level during that period.
And I find it very satiating when I have that coffee in the morning. Like if I'm doing intermittent fasting and I have that coffee in the morning, I put the MCT oil, and sometimes I put grass-fed butter. Sometimes I just use the MCT oil, and I can go with, I don't feel full, but I don't feel hungry. And it will last me till 1 or 2 in the afternoon. Like, it's just amazing how much it satiates my hunger, but like any need to eat.
Absolutely. I'm not a coffee drinker, so I found the idea of, bulletproof coffee really hard to digest because I just don't like the taste of coffee. But on the weekends and stuff, when Kelly and I have done a little more fasting, we've had a little more flexibility with our schedules to fast longer in the mornings. We found that, midday when we sit down and actually break that fast, and we do it with perhaps, an omelet with avocado, I can actually have a breakfast that has no simple carbs, no bread, nothing like that. And not only be satiated at the time, but feel very satiated all the way until the evening. Whereas many times during the week when I've had, a slice of toast or something running out the door, all of a sudden I'm still hungry by, 10 o'clock in the morning after just having eaten something at 8. So it's truly interesting how when you fuel your body with those good fats at the appropriate time, it can actually keep you feeling satiated much, much longer. And we're not obviously spiking those blood sugar levels and the insulin levels, which are really the thing that is so dangerous.
Yeah. It's really wild. I've lost that crazy hunger, like that hangry feeling. I really don't get that anymore, even if I haven't eaten for a long time. Not to say I'm not hungry, but I don't feel like that crazed hungry, like I'm going to kill somebody or I'm going to.
Yeah. Now, I will admit, when I was doing some caloric restriction, I got hangry. Yeah. That was no fun. So Jill, thanks so much for having me on today. This was really awesome. I hope I've been able to share a little of the information that I've been learning and reading.
Fantastic information.
Really appreciate
I think there's a lot of confusion out there between the intermittent fasting and caloric restriction. So I love that you talked about that. And it was fantastic. And I just want to say to everyone again, thank you for tuning in. This is our Wellness Revolution education series. And we will be doing these weekly, and we will post them in the Facebook events, but we also are going to start a YouTube channel. Right now it's on Kelly and Arthur Lupshaw's, or the Lupshaws, I think it's on YouTube.
Yes.
And so you can find any replays of our webinars there, and we will continue to bring you great content. So if you guys have any feedback or any topics you want covered, feel free to comment in the Facebook event. And we'll keep that in mind for the future.
Thanks, you, everyone.
Arthur. That was fantastic.
Okay. Have a great night.
You too.